All right, our lesson today is Joseph put into prison. Do you remember the theme that I said I was going to probably read to you? Well, I didn't forget. It says, "Don't be afraid to trust an unknown future to an all-knowing God." And I think that fits very well with Joseph here, because it was definitely an unknown future for him, but yet he was trusting the all-knowing God. And so he's a good example for us to live by the way he lived. You know, it don't seem like that Joseph, you know, all the bad things that happened to him before the good come along, you know, he just seemed like he took it in stride. And that's the way God wants us to when we think that maybe things are not going the way we'd like for them to go. Well, let's take them in stride, because God has something for us, and things are going to work out if we'll only just trust God. Our memory verse is 1 Peter 3:13. "And who is he that will harm you, if ye be followers of that which is good?" Peter wrote that. So that also goes along with the lesson, goes along with Joseph. And, you know, maybe Peter had Joseph in mind when he wrote that even. I don't know. But Peter had a lot of things in his life too that he had to trust God with. And, you know, it brings it right on down to us. We have a lot of things in our life that we gotta leave in the hands of God and trust the hand of God to do and to carry out His will through our life. And we never know. We never know from one day to the next what God has in store for us. And the only thing that we can be is just be ready to do what God wants us to do. I'm going to read the junior emphasis. "In Egypt, Joseph became a servant to one of Pharaoh's officers named Potiphar. Potiphar's wife tried to seduce him to sin with her. When Joseph refused her, she lied about it, and he was thrown into prison. However, God was with him there." And so that's kind of the emphasis of our lesson there. We'll go ahead and get started into it then. Genesis 39, starting with the first verse. "And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was how do you pronounce that? Prosperous. Okay. I didn't know whether that was the right way. In other words, a successful man is what that word meant. "And he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him," talking about Joseph, "and that the Lord made all that Joseph, did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight," Potiphar's sight, that's what he's talking about. "And he served him." Joseph served Potiphar. "And he made him overseer over his house." He made Joseph the overseer over Potiphar's house. "And all that Potiphar had, he put in Joseph's hand. And it came to pass from the time that he had made him overseer," talking about Potiphar making Joseph overseer of his house, "and over that he had," what Potiphar had, which Joseph was over, "that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house." Now, that is Potiphar. The blessing came because of Joseph, is what it was there, and in the field. And not only in the house, but also in the field. And And he left, talking about Potiphar here, left all that he had in Joseph's hand, and Potiphar knew not aught he had. He just left it all to his discretion, the financial, and took care of the bills and all that kind of stuff. He left that all to little old Joseph, a little Hebrew guy, a little foreigner, you might say. But he left it to him because it's not because Joseph just found favor in his sight and just because he was who he was or anything, but it's because that he could see that he could trust him. That's what it would all amount to. And he knew not aught he had, save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person and well-favored. Well-favored, I think, means a nice-looking guy, a handsome guy. And so, okay, here I tried to explain to you what the he's and hims and all that were, and I hope you was able to follow along. But, Joseph had the attitude in his mind that he was going to follow God no matter what it cost him. That's right. And that's the way we should be, no matter what it cost us. In the good times, oh yeah, everybody's ready to follow God in the good times. And then a lot of times when the trouble comes, that's a lot of times when people will choose and say, oh, I'm going to follow God. And then when it gets back in the good times, where are they at? They're out doing their own thing, But no, Joseph wasn't like this. Joseph, through the thick and the thin, Joseph was with God. Joseph had made up in his mind that he was going to serve God no matter where it took him, no matter how he was treated. He didn't just serve God during good times or when he needed God, but he served him all the time. And that's the reason why Potiphar found grace, or why Joseph found grace in Potiphar's eyes, was because of that. Because Joseph did what God wanted him to do. God blessed Joseph. Where do we get our blessings from? We get them from God. If there's any blessings, we get them from God. Even the rich people, well, yeah, but they work for their money. Well, who gives them the strength to work for the money? Who gives them the position that they have to be able to make that money? Who gives them the health that they need? God does. And that's one thing that people take kind of for granted, that, well, I make the money, I can do whatever I want to do. Well, yeah, but when trouble comes, when health declines, what happens, Well, Joseph was right in the middle of God's hand, you might say. Joseph in Potiphar's house. Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, bought him. I would say that Potiphar made a good investment when he bought Joseph. Now, I'm not not for slavery or servants or that, but that's the way it was. And I think Potiphar made a good investment when he bought Joseph. Here is Joseph, away from his home and family and now sold as a slave servant, However, the Lord was with Joseph. If we don't have the Lord with us, we better back up and see where we missed out and go back to that place and get God with us, because things weren't going to go very well if we don't have God with us. And Joseph had God with him. He was probably taught, his father, his mother probably taught him about the things of God, and that's what Joseph chose to do. Now his brothers, we sometimes wonder about them, because they were the ones that was going to kill him. They were the ones that wound up selling him. They were the ones that put him in the pit. They were the one that was ready to get rid of him. And so, there he was. Here is Joseph, away from home and family, now sold as a slave servant. However, the Lord was with Joseph. He was honest and good. Isn't that a good characteristic to have? Honest and good. You know, honesty includes telling the truth. If you're tell a lie, that would not necessarily the honest part, but it is an honest part too. And so, you know, he was honest and good. If he made a mistake, he admitted it, probably. And, you know, he told Potiphar, well, I made this mistake, and whatever, you know. But God had him. He was where God wanted him. And that was the main thing. Potiphar trusted him, trusted Joseph. He put all that he had in the house and in the field in Joseph's care. The Lord made it all go well for Joseph's sake. Okay, running Potiphar's house was a smaller deal than running the country of Egypt. You remember now, we're gonna jump ahead a little bit. And you know, you remember how that he was in control of all the grain that was coming in, and he was in control of all of that. Well, that's a lot bigger deal than what Potiphar had. I think God had him in this to get him prepared for something bigger and better. And you know, that's the way he is with us. He lets us do the little things, you know. And pretty soon then we're required to do something a little bigger, you know, and something more bigger than. More bigger? Is that right grammar? I don't think it is, but you know what I mean. You know, he's getting prepared. And you know, God does that to us. He don't just drop us into something great big. He usually prepares us, and he sees how we handle the things that seem like it's big. This seemed like it was big to him right there, but just think about what's on the way there. Okay, verse 7. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife, talking about Joseph's master, which is Potiphar's wife, cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, lie with me. But he refused, and said unto his master's wife, behold, my master wotteth. I think I'm saying that right. Huh? Wotteth. Okay, I was way off on that then. Not what is with me in the house, and he hath committed all that he hath in my hand. That word means knows. He knows what's going on, you know. The master, he kneweth not what was going on. That's what it was, that he had left everything for Joseph to be in control of. There is none greater in the house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness? He just called it what it was, wickedness, and sin against God. Against God, he says. And that's bigger than Potiphar. Yes, And it came to pass as she spake to Joseph day by day, day after day. Seemed like every day there was that temptation. That's what it sounds like to me. That he hearkened not unto her. Well, we can thank the Lord for that he held up under temptation, which God says we can hold up under temptation, to lie by her or to be with her. Okay, we see that there was a temptation that came. Joseph, I don't think, just decided that, well, the temptations come and he done the right thing on the spur of a moment. I think he already had in his mind that every day I'm going to probably have to face this. And every day I'm not going to be wearied by what she says. I'm going to stand for God. And that's the way we are every day. We may be wearied every day with a temptation. You never know what kind of temptation is going to come to you. But we need to keep our eyes on God, just like Joseph did here. Potiphar's wife tries to entice Joseph. Joseph was good and he was good looking. However, Potiphar's wife was not good. She cast her eyes upon Joseph. This was wrong. She had a husband. She should not want another. You see a lot of people that are married, has spouses, and they're always looking around. People out there in the world do that a lot, Hey, what about that vow that you took as forsaking all others? That was what was in my vow when I took my wife, and I'm sure that probably was in yours too, forsaking all others. My eyes is on Sister Paula. That's what my eyes is on. First on God, and then on her. But she was looking around and had other ideas in her head there. Joseph would not listen to her. Joseph put her out of his mind. He said, "My master trusts me." Now he did answer. He says, "My master trusts me. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" How can I do that against Potiphar, my master, and against God? And he could have said, "and against you." See? But she wasn't thinking about that part, but she was only had evil in her heart there. Nevertheless, she kept talking to him. He tried to keep away from her. Let's go to our next reading there, which is verse 11. And it came to pass after this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there was none of the men of the house there within. And she caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." And he left his garment in her hand and fled and got him out. Whew, now he's in a predicament. Then one day she caught him by his garment or coat. Joseph slipped out of it and ran away. When people tempt you to do wrong, be like Joseph. Run away from it. Run away from it. Run away from temptation. What does it say? Flee evil. Flee. If the devil confronts you, flee from him. Get away from him. Don't try and debate with him or anything like that, but to flee. Get away. Tell him to get out of here and get away. Let's kind of look at one thing here. I'm going to mention one thing, and then maybe I might expound on it a little bit later on. The coat of many colors was involved earlier. Now, and that identified him, to his father, right? Okay. The garment here is another kind of like a coat. It identified him, that he was there, not on his terms, but was there. Let's keep that in your mind there. Let's go to verse 13. And it came to pass when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and was fled forth, that she called unto the men of her house, and spake unto them, saying, See, he hath brought in a Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came in unto me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. Let's stop right there just a minute. She had to make herself look good. She had to make herself look like a victim when really Joseph was the victim. She was the aggressor. But she had to make it look good. After a sin is committed, we have an excuse for it a lot of times. If a sin has been committed, there's people always has an excuse for why they commit sin. That's what I'm trying to say there. Or they will blame someone else, which is an excuse too. Yeah. Or they'll try and fix it themselves a lot of times. That's a lot of times what happens when there's a excuse. When there's a sin committed. You know, and until we get to the point where, hey, I committed that sin, it was all on me, Lord, it's up to you to fix it. You know, that's what it had to be. But you know, she didn't do that. She says, hey, this little guy that my husband brought in tried to attack me, you know. Let's go on to verse 15. And it came to pass when he heard that, I chopped that up. And it came to pass when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled and got him out. And she laid up his garment by her until her Lord came home. And she spake unto him according to these words, saying, the Hebrew servant which thou hast brought unto us came in unto me to mock me. And it came to pass, as I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled out. Verse 19 is missing. I'm going to read it. And it came to pass, when the master heard the words of his wife, which she spake unto him, saying, after this manner did thy servant to me, that his wrath was kindled. In other words, Potiphar's wrath was kindled because of what she had said. And then verse 20 is, and Joseph's master took him, put him into prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in prison. All because of nothing that Joseph did wrong. He's in prison. What was circumstantial evidence is all it was. A lot of times circumstantial evidence does not hold up in court usually. And that's kind of what this was here. That's what this was. All because of a big old lie. That's all it was. And then she had to lie to get herself out of it, you know. So, you know, it was a big mess here. And then who suffers for it? Joseph suffers because of it. Potiphar's wife was left holding Joseph's coat. She called to the other men in the house and lied about Joseph. She said he was the one trying to do wrong. She said she screamed, and he ran away without his coat. When Potiphar came home, she told him the same lie. Not only to the men of the house, but also to her own husband. It made Potiphar angry. He believed her, and he did not investigate. Joseph being imprisoned. Potiphar believed his wife. Angrily, he put Joseph in prison. Everything seemed to be going wrong for Joseph. What could go wrong went wrong. Nothing went right in his eyes. But you know, he couldn't see the future, and God did. And you know, everything was going right according to God's plan. But man, how could he see that now? Let's see, how am I going to get out of this mess? How is them dreams going to come true? Here I am down here in a strange land, now in prison. How? But you know, he didn't take a feel sorry for himself attitude. He kept serving God. He kept serving God. I served God during Potiphar's house, and he had a lot of respect for me, and then this happens, and now I've lost all respect with him. Now I'm here in prison. Should I just do what I want to do, or should I try and build up respect here? Well, he took the latter, and we're going to find out here. Everything seemed to be going wrong for Joseph. Sold into slavery, lied about, and now in prison. Would those dreams ever come true? Yes, they were special dreams from God. They would come true. Did it pay Joseph to do right? He seemed to get the worst end of every deal. When my father and I used to talk about getting the worst end of the deal, we always talked about the dirty end of the stick. It's kind of what we always said. That was our family talk on getting the dirty end of the stick, getting the dirty end of the deal, you know. And that's exactly what little Joseph did. He got the dirty end of the stick. But it says, just wait. God's people often have to suffer wrong for a while. Nevertheless, God sees, and all will come out right in the end. Let's read, I'm going to read some 3 verses here. Matthew 5. We think of Matthew 5 as being the Beatitude scriptures. Well, let me read some of them, 10 through 12. Blessed are they which are persecuted for righteousness' sakes, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed, now this was written after Joseph, so Joseph didn't get a chance to read this here. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and shall say all manner of evil against you falsely for my sake. How's that? Well, he goes on and says, rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven, for so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. So, you know, this was a Beatitudes that Jesus gave on the Mount, on the Sermon on the Mount. And, you know, if Jesus said it, you can be assured that it's going to take place there. It is apparent that no question entered Joseph's mind as to how he should answer the temptation that came to him. Did God just richly endow him with blessings that you're going to make that decision? He didn't force that decision, but he did endow him with the blessings that I'm going to do what God tells me to do. And you know, if we do that, we can be endowed the same way with his blessings. He was decided, and no persuasion could alter his stand. Let's be that way. Right. No persuasion can alter our stand with God. No price was too great for him to pay to remain on the side of right. Let's do the same thing. Let's stand firm. Property, comfort, position, reputation, all could go. He still would obey God. Yeah. I don't want my reputation to be dirtied. I don't want my reputation. No, but if your reputation is dirtied because you're doing right, that's okay. You know, Jesus' reputation was dirtied, so to speak, but it was only accusations. And that's what makes the difference. False accusations will dirty your reputation. It sure will. But you know, as long as you're doing right, as long as you know you're doing right, as long as God knows you're doing right, so what? It didn't bother him. Decisions like Joseph are seldom made at the sudden moment of crisis. We have to think about that before. What if something like this happened? How am I going to stand? We cannot think deep and straight at that time, you know, when the persecution comes. The decision or commitment must be made before the trial comes. Only the matter of following it can be chosen at the time of temptation. So you need to have it settled. You need to have it settled before it comes. We don't know what's coming, but whatever might come, I'm going to follow you, Lord. That's what we can say there. And really mean it. I mean, yeah, we can say it with our mouth, but and then altogether do something different. But let's get it in our head. Let's get it in our heart. Let's keep it in our heart and think about it every so often, because we never know. Let us, like Joseph, make our decision now to be true to God, whatever comes. The time may come sooner than we think, when some of us must stand alone and be tested by persecution as to whether we will be faithful to God or yield to Satan. And we're going to do one or the other. Yeah. One or the other. So why not do the right thing? Joseph did. Oh yeah, it put him through a lot of stuff. But think about the end, We think about the end time also. Where do we want to spend eternity? There's a song, have you counted the cost? Have you counted the cost? It should be very easy to count the cost. Do I want to do right or do I want to do wrong? Well, if I do right, yeah, it might cost some things. But if I do wrong, look at the eternity cost. Okay? Let's go right to eternity then. Look at the eternity cost. If you do right, you get heaven. If you do wrong, you get hell. That's pretty easy. That's pretty easy cost to count, isn't it? Yep. All right, we'll leave that there. Remember, we can remain true if we take God's way, because He will make a way of escape that we may be able to bear it. That's found in 1 Corinthians 10 and 13. And I'll read it to you. There hath no temptation taken you, but such as is common to man. But God is faithful. God is faithful. I want to stress that. Who will not suffer you to be tempted above that ye are able. If there's any giving up, it's you giving up. It's not that God has failed you. It's because you've turned loose of God's hand. But will with the temptation also make a way of escape, that ye may be able to bear it. How can we make the right decision or choose the right side when so many differing voices advise us? Well, let's keep our eyes on Jesus. There's only one voice if we keep our eyes on Jesus. Yeah, there's voices out here wanting us to do this. There's voices over here wanting us to do this and do that and do the other thing. And just, there's all kinds of things that people are wanting you to do and be and whatever. But if we keep our eyes on Jesus, there's that one voice. Joseph looked heavenward. He did not consider changing things, the custom of the country, what was expedient, or what would put him in right with his owner. All he considered was what was right in God's sight. See, all these voices, that I've just illustrated just a second ago there. See, he had the same thing. Well, you're in a strange country. You customs are different and all this, and it's okay to just do this and do that. But he had his eyes on God, and God told him, "This is the way to go." You remember back there when you were in Israel, when you was in Cana. No, it wasn't Cana at that time, was it? Was it Cana? Was back where his homeland. Ur of Chaldee, okay. Back in his homeland, you're still living according to that. You're still living with God, see? And that's what he was talking about. Where am I at here? He kind of lost my place. When he determined to choose right and shun, all he considered was what was right in God's eye. When he determined to choose right and shun evil, which is good for us, do right, shun evil, and positively look for the right way, we can find it in the Bible and in the leadership of the Holy Spirit. Prayer always helps. Prayer always helps. Young people, we don't have any young people around here, or well, some may consider themselves young, but it's also older people too, who wish to avoid falling into sin. The devil is after young people. He's after newborn babes in Christ. He's after middle-aged people. He's after old people. He's after anybody that he can get his hands on. And so what I'm getting ready to say here, is for anybody. And it's for all who wants to really be in with God. Take a lesson from Joseph. Take a lesson from Joseph. Whether you're a newborn Christian or 100 years old, and anywhere in between, take a lesson from Joseph. He not only refused to do the sin the woman suggested, he also refused to be with her. He didn't hang around and reason with her and one thing and another. He got out of there. If you are not to steal, deceive, tell filthy jokes, stories, commit fornication, drink and smoke, you must not go with people who do. And that's a good thing, because that's what's on their minds. And somebody that has God on their minds can't really have fellowship with these kind of people, and is bound to be tripped up, or there's a good chance that they could be tripped up and stumble. And so best thing is avoid them kind of people. Let's go to Genesis 39:21. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. Oh, see, it's going to pay off again. Him doing the right thing, it sounds like it's going to pay off again. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. Talking about a second chance. You always hear it's second chance. Well, Joseph's got a second chance here. They're in the prison. But how can God use me here in the prison? Well, just hang on. Just hang on. The keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him. And that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper. Things seemed to be going from bad to worse for Joseph. Being over Potiphar, what Potiphar's all that he had, and then get slammed into slammer, so to speak. That's going from bad to worse. That definitely is. But the Lord was with Joseph. Yes, Joseph had it hard in many ways. He was treated unjustly. But the Lord was with Joseph. That made it all right. Joseph had peace and joy inside. That's one thing that God's faithful to give us, is peace and joy inside, in our heart, in our minds, in our living. When we know we're doing right, don't we have peace, love, joy, peace in our hearts? Long-suffering, a lot of them things, And, we can live a peaceful, joyful life, even in trials and temptations. I can remember a man up in, I might have told you a story before, I think I have, but a man that lived up there in Missouri. No, it didn't seem like anything that came along, he was just as happy. He could be in the middle of a hayfield and have a flat tire. Well, we got to go fix it, he says, and just didn't get upset, didn't raise his voice, but well, let's go fix it. And so he would go, and they would fix the flat tire, and just had patience like you wouldn't believe. But it was all God that was doing that, and that's the way we need to be. And I had a flat tire. I don't know why in the world I have a flat tire. Well, that's not pleasant to have, especially if you're in a hurry, and but I think it's kind of a way to kind of slow us down and get our attention sometimes, just to have something like that. But anyway, that's the way that goes. But Joseph had joy and peace in his heart. Just to know he had done right and that God knew it gave him joy. For there's joy in the Lord. We sing that song, "Joy in the Lord is my strength." I think I think Joseph could probably sing that song. Besides that, the Lord helped Joseph. He made the prison keeper to see that Joseph was honest. The keeper trusted Joseph and put the other prisoners in his care. The Lord gave success to all Joseph did. It wasn't Joseph doing it. It was God doing it, but he was following what God told him to do. That's what it all amounts to. I think Joseph could say, I didn't prosper Potiphar in his house. It was God prospering him. I was only just managing what God gave Potiphar. And that's the same way this is. And that's the way we are. In the work of God's, whatever's accomplished in God's work, it's God doing it. It's the Holy Spirit doing it. It's nothing to us. We might be a little old vessel, but might help out in that respect. But we need to be just willing and ready to be that help that God wants us to be. Joseph, a type of Christ. Some things which happened to Joseph were a type or a picture of what happened to Jesus later. Joseph had to suffer hard and severe things in order to bring to pass God's good plan for him. Jesus also had to suffer pain and death in order to do what he came to do, which was to save souls, which was to save us. Which was to save us. 1 Peter 3:18, I'm going to read that. For Christ also hath once suffered for sins, the just for the unjust. Christ being the just, the unjust, that's me. That was me. That he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but quickened by the Spirit. Christ, Joseph being a type of Christ. Now let's go back to the coat of many colors. I've already told you it identified him. His father identified him through that coat. The coat left with the woman. That identified him to Potiphar, that he was there. Okay, how does that measure up? What can we get out of that? Well, the only thing that I could come up with is let the cloak of righteousness identify us. That's what I come up with. Somebody else may come up with something else, but that is good advice. So let your coat be what identifies you, and we want that to be righteousness. If it's sinful, that cloak's going to identify you as that then. So let's identify. Let's make sure that we identify ourselves as righteousness there. Where does it all get you? This question is often asked by the worldly minded, meaning, what is the use of doing right when it brings no money or worldly advantages? What did it get Joseph? Prison, yes, but also it got him a clear conscience, the smile of God, and the confidence of the prison keeper. These priceless possessions were immediate. To come later were more blessings, which would have been lost if Joseph had yielded to sin. We need to hold the right sense of values.
Yes, sir.
And you know, that's very much so, that we need to be just like Joseph. Be as sure and stable as Joseph was. Okay, now let's go to our memory verse. Let's look at it one last time then. 1 Peter 3:13. And who is he that will harm you if ye be followers of that which is good? Joseph put into prison. In Egypt, Joseph was a servant to Potiphar. Then through the lie of Potiphar's wife, he was put into prison. Joseph had done right. He was sinned against again. He had trouble. Had God forgotten? Just wait. Just wait. Maybe the next few lessons might tell us something about that. I'm going to bring a summary here in looking at present day laxness in sexual morality. I think that's the word I need to say. Can we doubt that the example of Joseph is greatly needed now? On every hand, impure literature, low TV, radio, movie programs, trashy songs, suggestive jokes, indecent dress, and immoral practices assail our minds and our children's minds with wrong standard. Even many social, educational, and professional leaders teach that divorce and remarriage, premarital sex relations, trial marriages, and etc. are matters to be considered and practiced if desired. Now that's what's being taught to us. You know, I wasn't taught that way. My parents taught me different. And you know, they had godly values. And God hasn't changed any. I think them values still need to be practiced and taught today in a very strong way. However, God's standards has not changed. Lasciviousness, I think I'm saying that word right. It's the tending to excite lustful desires is what I got out of that word there. I mean, we don't use that word very often. Usually about the only time you hear that word is if we're reading the Bible. And that's about the only time. But tending to excite lustful desires. We see that all the time. We see that in advertisements even. I mean, advertisements, commercials, you know. Okay, that word and lust, fornication, sodomy, and adultery are still sins and still lead to destruction. The reaping is sure. Galatians 6:8. For he that soweth to his flesh shall of the flesh reap what? Corruption. But he that soweth to the Spirit shall of the Spirit reap life everlasting. Amen. Whew. That's not even a choice to make That's definitely a choice to make, but it's an easy choice to make. I want to have life everlasting. That's just simple to see there. The mind and heart must be kept as pure as the actions. We cannot live in a constant atmosphere of crime and immorality and expect to receive pure-minded and to remain pure-minded. Remove such influences from your minds and interests. That's one thing that we need to stay far away from. One more thing I'm going to say here. Be sure to take time for Bible study and meditation in your everyday life. That's what I can say. Be sure to take time for Bible study and meditate in your everyday life. When you're all by yourself, it's nice to do it together. It's nice to do it with your husband or your wife. It's nice to do that. But it's nice just by yourself and God and be able to talk and to bring in the things that God has for you. I'm going to go back. One more thing. The theme. Don't be afraid to trust an unknown future to an all-knowing God. You're going to hear that probably several times before this quarterly's over with. But I think it's nice to have that burnt in our minds. So I'm going to leave that with you there. And God bless each one of you.